This is the Turning Point Podcast. I'm Tyrone Stevens. I'm your host. Today we got a special guest. We got a young man that I've been knowing for a long time, since he was maybe 7, 8 years old.
Yeah.
And he's doing some great things in Detroit, Michigan. And with that, I'm going to give you, this is Johnny Cannon. Hey, Johnny, how you doing, man?
I'm good, and yourself, Ty? I'm doing
Yeah, I'm
good.
all right, man. All right. I certainly appreciate you coming on podcast.
Most definitely. So I'm obliged to do it today.
Yeah. Johnny,
Yeah.
we're gonna jump right into it. Johnny, why don't you tell the audience where you was actually raised at, which was, I'm gonna let you tell it, and your age and your education level.
Okay, most definitely. Yeah, I'm definitely born and raised here in the city of Detroit. In particular the Northeast Side, Coney Gardens. I was actually schooled in some of the Catholic schools in my general area, but I went to high school in Southfield and graduated from Southfield High. And ideally, I attended college maybe 1 year and I discovered it wasn't for me, but at the same time, I became an entrepreneur. So yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of me. Yeah.
So when you went to college, what did you take up in school?
First it was just general ed, and then I actually took a restaurant management class once I discovered I enjoyed restaurant business. So I took a
Okay.
restaurant management class.
Okay. By the way, how many restaurants you have in Detroit now?
Currently, I have two. I've had a few that I've opened, of course, but I have two currently working on a third at the moment.
Yeah, two successful restaurants in Detroit. Well, what's the name of your restaurants and where they're located?
Definitely. I have one in Midtown Detroit called Joe Louis Southern Kitchen, of course, named after the famed iconic boxer Joe Louis. It's a breakfast brunch restaurant. And then I have Lily Mae's Southern Buffet, which is in Southfield, Michigan. It's definitely more of a Southern cooking, lunch, dinner kind of spot.
Oh, okay. So therefore, I'm sure the people in Detroit and Southfield know where you're at. But the people who will be coming to Detroit, like visiting and so forth. Now, your restaurant your Joe Louis restaurant, that's exactly where?
That's at 6549 Woodward Avenue. That's Detroit, Michigan, 48202. And the Lily Mae's in Southfield is actually 29221 Northwestern Highway. And that's Southfield, Michigan, 48034.
Yeah. Okay, Southfield is a suburban area of Detroit. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah. And the one on Joe Louis on Woodward, it's not far from downtown Detroit.
Yep, it's about 2.5 miles. It's Midtown, they call it. New Center area to be exact, but it's New Center, Midtown, just before you enter downtown Detroit.
Oh, okay, okay.
And the main street, which is Woodward.
Okay. Johnny, tell us who influenced you to get into business?
I'll give credit to my father for one. He was an entrepreneur, and I experienced working with him at the ages of 15 as an entrepreneur.
Really?
And then, he had a beauty salon that he opened back in like 1991, I believe it was. And then my ex-father-in-law, who was a certified CPA, certified public accountant, very successful and still is today. And, I was with him at the ages of 19 until today as well. So I think they played a very pivotal role in my life to show me entrepreneurship role.
Okay, so these were two mentors you had.
I would call them mentors, yes.
Yeah.
Before I knew what a mentor was, they were my mentors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You knew what you needed, you know what I'm saying?
Before I knew it, but
right.
some attracted me to those two guys, though. Yeah.
So, would you strongly recommend, or is it a necessity that a young person coming into business get a mentor? In your opinion?
Wow, that's super important. And I'll just say one reason why is because a lot of times a mentor can tell you a lot of things on what not to do, right? And then ultimately, of course, if they're specifically in a certain trade that you're looking to get into, or certain business you're looking to get into, and you find a mentor with that experience in that arena, they can help you eliminate a lot of bumps, mean, you're going to run into things, learning curves, I'll call them. But, mentors is super important. Yes, it is.
Okay. Hmm. Yeah. So now everybody, I think, in the country knows Detroit has been known to be a pretty rough place at some points in times, and they know that there's been drugs in the streets of Detroit as well as a lot of other major cities. Did you ever get involved in the being in Detroit street life?
To be honest, I've had my journey of life, which I'll say yes. I've dibbled and dabbled. It's something to be a product in an environment that you see certain things and you be intrigued by it. But the one thing I'll say, even on the road I traveled, I always had a vision and a goal, and it was never the glitz and glamour of the hustling life. It was always still visualizing myself as an entrepreneur. So, I took pride in just knowing what I was doing with a purpose in mind, which was to start a business, because I know, we all know the road that the streets typically bring is death and jail. And very few evade that. And I think, always just, knew history of the Kennedys and some of those large families that did things, whether it was liquor or whatever they pushed and did back in the day before Prohibition, and they converted into corporate dollars. And so I was
Right.
always intrigued by that more than anything. Yes.
I got you.
Yep.
So, how did you manage to, you said a few escape from that sort of activity. How did you yourself escape? How did you become one of the few?
I think it's just important to, first of all, you have to have a vision. And at the end of the day, you can never let your vision get blurred, and you got to set goals. So I've always had goals. So for me, even when I was doing the things I was doing, I knew I wanted to start a business. And I did that young. At 19, I started a construction company. I was doing ceramic, marble floors, concrete. I did a lot of jobs on new development homes and things through my company. From there, I got into real estate through introduction at a bank that had a minority program where they was giving us the funds to purchase the homes and fix them up. And all this was on my journey of while I was going down that road. But at the same time, the restaurant opportunity came, and that was really my pivot at that point, because I saw the restaurant opportunity was endless, because you can scale, as big as you want to be globally. And
Mm-hmm.
so, once I stepped into the restaurant realm, there was things that, I had to make some decisions, and I made the right decision. And that was to step out on faith, let the things from the streets be behind me, and
Right.
figure out the business path, which is the one I think everybody should be more, how can I say, not excited to, but more intrigued by individuals that have success there. Because you don't have to go to school, or you don't have to be educated to do the streets. You can figure that out as long as you can add, of course. But with business, you got to have patience. You got to have some learning curves. You got to go through some things that ultimately, prayerfully would build a successful business.
Okay. So those things that some of the ingredients that it takes to be an entrepreneur, would you say that you learned some of those from your mentor, your
Most
mentors?
definitely. Yeah, I learned something from my mentor, and then ultimately the things you learn in the streets, is priceless as well. Because
Okay.
fortunately, some of the biggest drug dealers we've seen or know, ultimately, could run some Fortune 500 companies. And I agree. Business is business. It's just a matter of illegal business or non-illegal business, I say. But yeah, I think I picked up things from my mentors, of course, and a lot of that was just work ethic. The conversations I had, I think the questions I asked them at a young age, let them know that I was going to be something to reckon with in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, I want to take a few minutes out, and we at Turning Point Podcast would like to say, first of all, we like to interview people that's in the community, that's doing things in the community, that's inspiring people, because there's so much inspiration that's needed in the Black community. So we want to take the time to say that we really appreciate and respect you as first as a man and then as a businessman, and coming on here and sharing your experience, and your strengths and your hopes to this community in Detroit. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia myself, but I'm a native of Detroit. My heart is always with Detroit, and so we want to thank you very much. I mean, because you are a celebrity, community celebrity. Now we have celebrities like basketball players and entertainers, and they're celebrities too on a national level, but on the local level where people see every day, because everybody is not going to get a chance to play basketball and so forth. But you got more entrepreneurs, than you would have basketball players and so forth. You could have. So we want to take that time to thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate it. More than welcome.
And so we want to talk a little bit about Black people in business in the city of Detroit. Mm-hmm. What would you say is the strong points of Blacks in business in the city of Detroit, and what would you say that needs to be implemented? What kind of help Black people need, or what is needed for the Black community to
take it to the next level?
Yeah.
As a community. Well, I think it starts as for all of us is knowledge. And I think, we could do a much better job, and we need to do a much better job is sharing information and having time to commune and come together and speak to each other about the different businesses that we're all in. And we have to learn how to stop being worried about how much anybody's making or taking certain things to steal and try to duplicate versus creating their own. But the most important thing is just synergizing. And I think one of the biggest things I've looked at over the years with a lot of other communities, whether it be Chaldean, Chinese, Jewish, they have places where they commune, where they come together. And I can only imagine the things they're discussing is only beneficial to their nationality movement, which, of course, talking about spending their money internally first at their local neighboring same nationality businesses. And I think that's where we lack is me as a restaurateur, I know for a fact I got some things I could share with some other restaurateurs that has nothing to do with my recipes or anything to take away from me that would be a great benefit to them. And a lot of it is just how-tos that I've learned over the last 21 years. And vice versa to all the other industries that we're in. And from Detroit, I just think Detroit, great to see a lot of people attempting to do business, but it's all about sustainability and longevity. And my whole mission is to, of course, do a lot more than what I'm doing now, and I'm doing it. But more importantly, that when God called me home, and hopefully that's at 100 years old, but he called me home, that everything I've built continues to move forward, and not die off like I saw in the past.
Okay. I have been told that in the Jewish synagogue, the rabbi tell the children, say, if you want to buy something, we want you to know that there is a Jew somewhere that sells it. You find him. That's what I have been told that they teach the children.
I believe it.
Now, I'm of age 75 years old, and I've never, as a child, nobody never told me that.
Exactly.
Nobody never told me that. So that being so with the Jewish people, and I would imagine with all other ethnic groups, they have some sort of way that they talk about something similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
So in your opinion, what's some of the ways that we could implement that sort of thing, and where should those places be at where people should talk about unity and doing business with one another?
And the first place is the churches, because just like the rabbi, the impression I know the rabbi has on the children is no different than I know the pastor of the church has on the children, that the kids that's in their establishment, their church. And if the pastors, in my studies, it started in the Black community when we were segregated, of course, that the churches was the pillar to be there as a resource financially, and of course through mentorship or whatever it may be. But it's to pass that message through the churches. I mean, because it's all. I was raised by my grandmother, and God rest her soul, she died in 2013. But the one thing I really appreciate is hearing all of the old sayings that I see how universally and spiritually they all really mean something. Every single saying I've heard, from treat each other as treat people as you want to be treated, and so on and so forth. And I think the church is where the kids today and a lot of the adults today is partly where I think the segregation of, besides us segregating into community and feeling like we can go in white establishment, wherever. But to answer your question, it's the churches. I can go on and on. It's the churches.
Yeah.
First place, I feel.
And that's definitely one of the places it should be. I notice in my own lifetime, people are friendly and open with one another, is doing funerals, is doing church, and all that's around the church situation, funerals and so forth. So that's a perfect place for us to come together and start talking. And the ministers and the pastors of the church, I would think that they would really want people to be in business and entrepreneurs in the community striving and being able to hire people, and they're setting up businesses or and that sort of thing. Because if they're setting up business, that means they can tie.
That's it.
You know?
That's why it's universal.
I still want them to tie. You know,
exactly.
And so I was born in Kona Garden in 48. And in like 51, 52, we moved to Southwest Detroit. But I went back to Kona Garden every summer to visit my grandmother. I stayed there every summer. That's why I knew a lot of guys from Kona Garden. So as a kid, we had, even in Southwest Detroit and Kona Garden, you know, we had a little hotel in the community, or we had a store, we had the supermarkets. I mean, you had other people in business too. You had some Jews that were in business, you know, in the neighborhood. But we had a lot of business people. Like I said, I was sure we had our own house. We had big hospitals, you know, and we had drugstores, Boswell drugstore. He had them all over the city. And we had a hotel called the Better World. And I remember a guy coming back one day, and he said, man, he said, guess where I was? I said, where were you? He said, man, I was over there at the Holiday Inn. Now, there wasn't no Holiday Inns in the Black community. He said, man, I was in the Holiday Inn. I said, he said, yeah, man. He said, I'm laying up there, I have my silk underwear on, man, and they had air-conditioned rooms. Now, the Better World, the hotel in the hood, you had to let the window open to get some air. You had no air conditioning. So people started going to the Holiday Inn when they opened the door with the civil rights thing, when they opened the door, which was good that we was free to go anywhere, but we wasn't taught that don't take your money over there and give it to everybody, and you don't have none in your own community. You know, so people started going to the Holiday Inn instead of going to the supermarket in the hood. In the Black community, they started going to the supermarkets in the white community as if though the white food was better than the Black food. And so that made the Better World a hotel. By going to the Holiday Inn, the Better World had to close down. And basically, that's what happened everywhere.
But it's still repeated to this day.
Yeah, and so, and like, you know, a lot of young people really don't know their history because a lot of them don't take the time to read. I was shocked to find out that a lot of Black children hadn't read a book, and 18, 19, 20 years old, and haven't read a book all the way through, you know?
Exactly.
So what kind of programs they having over there about the illiteracy problem they having in Detroit?
Wow, there's places like the Youthville. I know for a fact they do a phenomenal job down there. It's in the inner city. There's different nonprofits. I know over at the old, I want to say Chadsey building, they got a lot of nonprofits where they focus on inner city education and things like that. Personally, I just think, unfortunately, we're generations away from our grandparents, I'll say. My grandparents would have been 90 something. But it's like, I didn't personally even really read a whole book, intrigued by a whole book, to read it anyway. And it's sad to say, but maybe 4 or 5 years ago. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've read more books, audio book, than ever. And I just think there's more that we all can individually do as far as parents, for sure, and just people that have influence to go back and help and give that education. And that's part of my mission, because reading is important. There's so much in the books, as we already, unfortunately, they said that you don't want us to know about it, just put it in the book, because they know we
Yeah,
ain't gonna read.
right. Yeah. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And if the truth be told, I didn't read a whole book all the way through until I was about 18, just about turning 19 years old. I never forget. I read Iceberg Slim,
Okay.
and I read that from cover to cover.
Oh, you intrigued by that one
I
there.
was intrigued by that one. What I'm saying. And another book he had, Trick Baby. I read that too.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I was intrigued by that. And I was surprised. I had some grandchildren of mine that said they had never read a book all the way through, and I said, "Wow, you never."
Yeah.
I said, "You got to read." So, in what would you say that the young black children in Detroit, what would you say that they need to do? Would you say they need to finish their education, or would you say that some of them need to go to trade school or this or that? What would you say that the present situation, what's going on now? I mean, how to deal with the situation now? I know what we should do and all that. I mean, should go to school, but are they going to go to school? So forth and so on. So, what would you say needs to be done creatively to deal with
Well,
problem?
well, I mean, first and foremost, I definitely believe it's important to finish the education through K-12, and if it had to be a GED, that's fine. I do advise that, because there are fundamental things that I think from math and certain classes that you take that gives you the basic fundamental. But once it goes there, I'm a firm believer that college is not for everyone. And I just believe if you choose to go to college, it should be very strategic and specific versus just going for general studies. I mean, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be in finance world, taking a finance class, if you want to be in marketing, taking marketing. But beyond some specific that college would definitely be beneficial, I encourage trades, because you can go and become an electrician, a plumber, HVAC, and build your company as large as you want to make it and be as rich and wealthy as you desire going down the trade route. So college is not, because college definitely does build debt, right? And so many have went to college and came out with student loans and things that has really hurt them through their adult years in the credit and things like that. So I encourage trades, because entrepreneurship is not for everyone. But at the same time, I encourage entrepreneurship if it's for you.
Mm-hmm. So, what's the reason why saying this to young people? What's the reason why that blacks should do business with one another? What's some of the reasons for that?
Well, it's generational, because the benefit goes deeper than us in the moment. Because if I go and spend my money at the Black Cleaners, and I encourage everyone to spend their money there, ideally, the Black Cleaners, you would hope they would want to expand, open up more cleaners. But the biggest thing is, if we spend it amongst each other and we build a bigger, more successful business platform based on bringing in the revenue, your children or my grandchildren or your grandchildren ultimately should have access to come and be able to communicate, to learn things, to maybe they want to open a cleaners one day, maybe they will open a restaurant one day. And that's why I think, whether it be a church or whether it be opening up African-American centers is important, because you got to have somewhere everyone feels to be a part of something. And I think that's where Gaines, and not to go sideways, but that's where Gaines, I feel, was able to recruit and sustain so long, as far as just out being gangs, whether it's Bloods, Crips, or whatever type of gang it is, because people a lot of times just want to be a part of something. And ultimately, if I show you the money I make in the restaurant business, and I tell you these are the books I've read, I think more children would be apt to go and read those books based on desiring to be a chef and or own a restaurant one day. So you got to have somewhere where we can come and commune and be able to communicate to the youth in particular, but more importantly to anyone. Because I know some adults that could benefit from sitting down having a conversation with me, you, and anybody else. It's just about communicating. And because none of us know everything, but if you know something that I can pick up on, he knows something you can pick up on, to me, that's what creates a better world. And the children, of course, in that same kind of way, just information internally that unfortunately a lot of other ethnicities are not going to share those trade secrets, right? So it's important for us to really, and I'm doing it right now, is reaching back to the youth and want to share all that I got to give, not just for my children, but for the other children that looks like my children, to be strong and strengthened in ways to think outside the box, no matter where they are. You could be in the projects, you can have your parents, unfortunately, on drugs or whatever it may be, but the imagination is powerful,
Wow, wow. Well, and speaking about the imagination, when did you start imagining that you wanted to go into business and you see yourself as being, well, let me put it like this here. What business did you imagine yourself being in first? And how did you go about dealing with that imagination? I mean, did you do it just one time, or you consistently thought about this here and you had one? What did you do? Tell me your story with that.
I'm gonna tell you just a quick snapshot of my story because it's interesting to me. And it always, for me, I think about children. So, I was probably about 8 years old, and my mom's best girlfriend, cousin came by the house, and he had this big old Mercedes. I must have been about 7 years old. And he had this big old, I won't say new, but it was a newer Mercedes. And I just remember looking out the window and out the door or whatever. And when he left, I said, well, I remember asking the question, what do he do? And she told me he was an electrical engineer. And from that day until I was every bit of 17, if you'd asked me what I was going to be, it was an electrical engineer. And so that was the first impression. I think the next impression to open my eyes up was really, I never own a beauty salon, but I think organically or subliminally, I just picked up traits from my father and watching his creativity. But then once I got with my father-in-law at the time, and he was 36 years old with a $16 million contract, he was doing exceptionally well. And so being in his world, and I started working for him at 19, I was 18 actually, and he was letting me go to the bank, deposit checks that was six figures. And it was blowing my mind, I ain't never seen no checks like that. Literally, it was IBM checks, DPS checks. And I'm just cashing these checks and depositing for him and going to the Pistons. He had a suite at the Palace back then in '94. And I'm just in his world. And so it showed me a bigger way of what's out there. And for me, it took about 2 years ago. My father was in the hospital for some treatment he was in there for. And we sitting talking. And he just came out of nowhere and was like, man, I remember when you was about 11, 12 years old. We was riding up Greenfield and Northland Mall was over there. And you just looking out the window. And I said, well, what is you looking at? I said, I wonder who owned that. Talking about the building. And when he told me that, I said, for real? He said, yeah. And I told whatever his answer was to me then, it just enlightened me now, because I find myself right now to this day when I'm riding on highways, I'm reading all these building signs. And in my mind, I'm calculating probably what kind of numbers they're doing. So for me, I think it was just embedded in me to desire to want to do big business.
Let me run it back to the beginning of that imagination. When you were thinking about, when you were imagining being an electrical engineer, did you go get any information about being that? Did you read anything about it, or did you go work with somebody that was an engineer, or what did you do besides, think about?
And the reason that's so powerful to me, because no, I didn't go and take no electrical engineer kids courses or anything like that. I was always great at math and I like science, and I just always got good grades. But that's just the power of the imagination, and more importantly, influence. How powerful it is to have successful people that you can relate to. Of course, being Black, you see a Black man and what you would think he's successful or he's wealthy or he's rich. And it obviously wasn't meant for me to be an electrical engineer. And I never went down that path. It was just, I felt proud to say when anybody ever asked me what I was going to be was an electrical engineer. And it was just that impression. Never took any courses or anything towards it. And ultimately, I think it was just a place to show how impressionable we are to the youth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now moving on with imagination, because we're going to ride this imagination because it's so powerful. We're going to ride this thing a little bit.
Let's go.
So moving on with imagination now, when you decided that you wanted to go in the restaurant business, now you start imagining yourself having restaurants. And so what was that like, your first imagination about the restaurant business? And what did you do to bring that about? Because we know imagination is one thing, but faith without works is dead, so we know that too.
Exactly.
So tell me, what did you do to bring that closer to reality, the restaurant?
And that just kind of happened. I never inspired to cook. I don't cook today. I never inspired to be a chef or anything like that. I think that's just, I'm an entrepreneur. And so my father had the salon where my first location wound up being, but he closed the salon in like 2001. And my grandmother came to me, and she had her name tied into the lease, and she asked me, did I have anything I could possibly do with the space, because there was still years left on the lease. And at the time, I was in the streets doing what I was doing. And it just was like, and it just clicked in, like, man, down here in the New Center area, there's no restaurants. I could do a sandwich shop. And lo and behold, I just went to California, went to Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, and it just came back and was like, you know what? I'm bringing chicken and waffles to Detroit. And I was the first one to do that in 2003 and did it well. And that was kind of how the restaurant business came about. But in doing so, and I'll share this with your listeners. And especially to the youth, it's about doing your due diligence, research, and knowledge. Knowledge is confidence. So I took the restaurant management class maybe 5 months after I opened the restaurant. So prior to opening, I never had no restaurant ownership experience. I literally hired a chef that my mom knew did some catering at a fine dining restaurant, and he was looking for some opportunity. We talked, and I brought him aboard. He helped create the menu. And then I just took what I would call my own experience of just doing what I'm doing, right? And I just got out there on my own and went for it. And that's kind of how it just turned into what it turned into, literally.
Yeah. Well, that was something. Now, you went out in California, and you went to Roscoe's.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been there before myself.
Yeah.
Nice place. Yeah, and so you got the idea from Roscoe's, from out there in California, that I may bring something like this to Detroit. Is that how that went?
That's totally how it went. Once the opportunity, of course, with the space, and I was just thinking of, and I can say even to my latest craze that I got going with the turkey legs is, I just, something to drive the restaurant is what I knew I needed. And chicken and waffles, of course, through Roscoe's and rap music and movies was so popular, and we didn't have it in Detroit. No one was promoting chicken and waffles. And it was the best move I could have made, was just thinking of that. Went to a food show and found a lot of different vendors there, and came back. I said we went into the office and went to work and came out with some magic that the community still talk about to this day, which was New Center Eatery. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was the name of it?
New Center Eatery in the New Center area. So I called it New Center Eatery.
That's on the Boulevard.
West Grand Boulevard, yes, right across from the Hotel St. Regis.
Yeah. And see, that just goes to show you traveling broadens your horizon. You know, it's just broadening. When you go to different places and you see different things, you know,
1,000%.
yeah. I think traveling was one of the most important one of the most important things in my life. Having the opportunity to be able to do at a young age is to travel and see things. And
Exactly.
to show you seen that and came back and you had imagination, you know what I'm saying? Well, hey, what, maybe I'll go in the restaurant business.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, imagination is powerful. And young people that's listening, if you want to go into business and be successful, take the advice from this young man here, Mr. Johnny Cannon. Is that right? If I'm pronouncing your name
Johnny
right?
Cannon.
Yeah.
Yep. Johnny Cannon. Yep.
Take the advice of this young man that has done this thing. He's saying that, you know, you go get a mentor. Yeah, this is what he said. I'm just going back over what you said. Get a mentor, get somebody that knows about that business, and you ask questions about that business, and even if you have to get a job there working with him, you know, if he don't need nobody to say, well, hey, I work for free.
That's it.
I think it might be just a law to work for free, but you know, but if somebody know that you got that kind of willingness,
Exactly.
you know, to do,
Exactly.
then they might be more prepared to help you further your endeavor. You know.
And I'll piggyback on that because the imagination is everything for sure. But then there's also really understanding the universal law of how you manifest things. And we all know that, you know, we ask for things in abundance and the universe and God adheres it. And you can't be afraid to ask for the biggest things that you can imagine. I just always say being within realistic, you know, means, but more importantly, just the power of really how when you speak it and you put the actions behind it. And a lot of times you may not find a mentor in that specific realm that you know and you feel you can touch. Well, the good part this day and age, I got mentors on YouTube like Magic Johnson. Never met him, but I consider him a mentor. But then even still, there's consultants in certain fields that you can hire, you know, because that was one thing I should have done before I opened my first restaurant was hired a consultant if I didn't have a restaurant mentor. And it would have saved me. And more importantly, I would have made a lot more money on the first restaurant than I did. But I'm happy with what I did make because more than anything, it built my brand. It built brand awareness and name recognition attached to Newsom the Eatery. People respected that. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to add to that. Just to understanding imagination, but manifestation.
Yeah, and for those that might have got a little lost about the imagination and manifestation, what what Johnny's just said, it said so eloquently, is that the manifestation is that you carrying out what that is that you're imagining. And you step out on that and you keep working at that. And then that power, you know, creates the manifestation. Then boom, it comes, you know, because everything you see, everything you look at, you know, you go outside, you look at buildings, you look at this and cars and this and that. It was first an imagination.
Right.
Before the manifestation, before it came about, but you got to imagine it before it can come about. And then once you imagine it, just by imagining it, young people, that don't mean, you know, that it's going to happen. You got to put some work behind it.
That's it.
No
That's it.
work, no pay, you know.
That's it.
You don't work, you don't get paid. And that's that simple. You know, it's just that simple. You know, a lot of young people, as you know, Johnny, they look at the internet and they say, oh, and they see all these things. These guys got these big, pretty houses, and
Exactly.
I'm living, and et cetera, and so on. You know, but then when you look behind, you say, oh yeah, I want that. But what are you willing to do to
Right.
get it?
Right.
Have that, but you just got to do something. You got to go through something, young folks. You're not nobody's gonna give you a house, gonna give you a car. gonna
Right.
give you a nice a way to live. You got to go out there and you got to get it.
Gotta get
Yeah.
it.
You got to
And
go
there's
out.
no other way it happens other than until you become an heir to something. You
Yeah,
know, that you hand it to you, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I mean, you might hit the lottery or something like that. That chance is slim and next to none.
Exactly. Exactly. Better believe it.
So,
Gotta work.
so what we talking about in between that imagination, you make some affirmations. You start thinking about some, you're telling yourself some things. You know, your imagination is, young folks, is the imagery, is something you see in the mind. Now, your affirmation is something that you're saying, okay, this is how I'm gonna do this here, and this is why I'm gonna do it, you know, and I want to be healthy and wealthy and prosperous, and you know what I mean? I want to take care of my mother and da 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 da, and my father too, so forth. So you have to put those things in place, you know, your imagination, affirmation, and put some work in there, and keep focus. Keep your eye on the donut. You
Important.
know?
That's super important.
Yeah.
Because there's so many distractions out here that I'll tell anybody, not a woman, a wife, a girlfriend, or nothing can throw my vision off. Because at the end of the day, there's so much to be accomplished, so much more to do, and there's no room for being thrown off. And the devil will work in many ways to try to throw you off. And you just got to stay focused. What you're saying, I think that's one of the biggest things that he blessed me with was the ability to lock in and see it. And no matter what has come at me, taxes, IRS, whatever, I don't worry about those things because I pray. And as we know, if you pray, you don't worry. If you go worry, then don't pray. And it always works out. It always works out.
Yeah, I like that. And I heard you say when we had a chance to talk earlier, I heard you say that you deal, you think about solutions, not problems. I thought that was so profound. And for the young people that's listening, he said that he thinks about solutions, not problems. You know, in other words, in life, you're going to have problems. That's life, young people. You're going to have problems. And these days, you're going to have plenty of problems.
It don't stop. How much money you got, you're going to have problems.
Times it's problems, but this time, showing up is problems, you know?
That's right.
And so what Johnny is saying is that, you know, he focused on the solutions. He focused on how to come up with the solution for the problem, to fix the problem. It's going to be problems, but he's coming up with, he's thinking about, he's solution oriented. You know, he's thinking about solution, don't think about the problem.
That's
You
it.
know, you think about solving the problem. That's the solution, solving the problem, young folks.
Yep,
Yeah, that
yep.
when you said that, Johnny, I really liked it, that man.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's important because no matter how much money you got, no matter how much anything, personal and business, so many people I don't even have the energy when people sitting complaining. I tell them again, it gets under my skin because at the end of the day, you tell me what the problem is once. You don't have to say it again because immediately I'm thinking of something I can tell you to help you come with the best solution. And I don't
right,
know
right.
nothing else, but it's
You
powerful.
know, in other words, you don't be going around keep talking about the problem.
No.
Well, see, when you know, and when you don't know, you don't know. You know.
And we're gonna
Uh,
find out how to get to the no.
yeah.
That's
So,
it.
you know, we're coming close to the end, Johnny. I want you to wrap it up from your perspective on some things that you would like to say to the young folks, or something that you want to get out to the community at large in Detroit, or whatever you might want to say.
Yeah, for sure, man. For me, it's about my people, but I love people as a whole. But it's about the children for me. And so, I just believe the future is in the hands of the generations behind me, and I'd say the children. So for me, it's about caring about more than yourself and ultimately being willing to give and know that it'll come back tenfold. And so it's all about growing, being a great example at this point, becoming a even more bigger mentor on a bigger platform is part of my next level of what I'm doing. And I just want to know that I want people to know that, you know, if they're ever here in Detroit and they come to the restaurant and ask for me, if I'm there, I'm gonna get the same energy I'm giving today. And everything I've said today is how I live. And ultimately, I got huge goals. And within those goals is helping as many people as I can. So if you understand that, giving first, and it always comes back, you know, if you practice that, you'll see how universally the life is set up to give and give and give. And you just get, you know, opportunities and moments will get poured on top in abundance for you. And so for me, it's just about being able to spread my knowledge. Anything I know, I like to give. And just as we talked, you know, I want to say I'm glad I ran into you like we did and hadn't saw you in some years. And more importantly, I'm proud to see your journey and where you are today and tapping into this new technology and new, you know, outreach. And I'm happy and obliged to be on here today just to spread my word, you know, and I'll tell those that are out there that, you know, they're going to hear and see much more of me, because that's part of my mission, is spreading the knowledge and really giving that good positive energy and how to as many people as want to know, how do you go from A to Z, right? And there's no straight shot. You know, there's going to be roadblocks that'll send you left or send you right. But the goal is to always keep moving forward while you're going left and going right. Keep going forward. And that's where don't worry about the problems, focus on the solutions come from, and keeping your vision and your focus. And if they do that, you know, we'll have many more successful Black people, and we'll have many more people wanting to commune and synergize together so we can create some real currency and sharing and spread knowledge. That's what this is all about for me.
Well, that's certainly needed, and I'm glad to hear that. We need more people like you. And as we had talked earlier, and we're going to talk more about it at another time, we talked about workers' co-op. We're not going to go into it right now, but we're going to talk later about workers' co-op, because we think workers' co-op here at Turning Point Podcast will be a great thing for the city of Detroit. We think that, and we will be talking about that in the future. And I would love to have you back on the show, and we can discuss workers' co-op in more detail.
Definitely.
Yeah. And
I look forward to it.
Yeah, yes. And we'll do that the next time. And I would like for you to tell your mother, my friend, that I said hello.
I sure will. She asked me the other day, did y'all do the podcast? I said, no, not yet.
and her friend Deborah, because every time I see her, I see them, you know.
Exactly. They was riding together.
So they've been friends a long time. Yeah,
yeah, they was riding together when I called and they asked me.
It's been such a pleasure to have you on, man. And all I can say is your dad and your mom done a wonderful job with you, man. You're a wonderful young man, man. And I wish you all the success and health and wealth and happiness it is to have. Get much as you want to get, you know.
Definitely.
And we at Turning Point Podcast will be back again. I want y'all to hit the subscribe buttons, the share buttons, make some comments and some likes. And we'll see you next time. And we out of here. Peace.
Definitely. Peace.